Oh my god, he's recording.
I'm going to go back to the show.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Enjoy.
I will see you guys later.
Yes.
Hell yeah.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, Big Brother is listening.
our
Hello
boyfriend.
to my TED Talk. Apparently we're going to be talking about equestrian sports now.
Hey,
So the first question is, equestrian events are
hold on,
often...
hold on. This is
Oh,
a legit interview.
Oh,
My
you're
name
gonna
is
run
Lauren.
it.
I'll be hosting this interview. You don't ever know. Maybe I'll post this on the channel just
Oh
cause
my god.
my first
Okay.
practice one.
Well, let's start all over.
Okay, hi. My name is Lauren, and today I will be interviewing Olivia because she does sport things with horses. Olivia, you've got the lead.
Hi, my name's Olivia. Yes, I do sports things. I'm not currently a main instructor right now, but I have been an instructor in the equestrian world for quite some time, maybe at least 10 to 15 years. I have my own ranch, but it's mostly private right now. In the future, we're hoping to get some more clients, but right now we're just doing it, kind of trying to just doing our own thing. But I have done it in the past. I've done what's called a drill team. It's basically, I like to call it maybe like synchronized swimming on horseback or marching band on horseback. It's pretty neat. Did that for about at least 15 to 20 years of my life. Now I am just kind of a casual rider. I do mostly gymkhanas, which are like obstacle courses for horses and like fun little setups for horses, like running barrels, running poles. A lot of stuff that I can expand on if anyone's interested. But yeah.
Wow. Also, Angel's here. Hi, Angel.
Hello.
That's our emotional support angel.
Yeah,
That's
it's
so
me.
cute. Thanks, Angel.
You're welcome.
Alrighty. So my class is about sport sociology. So a lot of these questions will be for broad topics, but you can obviously link them specifically to your history with your sport. Alrighty. I guess I should read these questions, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go over the first one.
Okay. First question. Equestrian events are often viewed as a very specialized and expensive sporting event for children to get into. How, in your experience, has the economy, money, and influence of some groups or individuals impacted horse riding for you and those you have worked with?
This is actually a very very deep question. Horseback riding for a lot of people is very expensive. You know, a lot of people don't know where to turn, how to even get into it. And then starting as a new person in any sport, you know, you're really relying heavily on your instructors, the trainers, to get you going. And a lot of times, you know, there's always some sort of upfront fee that you have to pay. You know, whether if you're doing, you know, little league with your kids, you know, you have to go buy equipment and stuff like that. Well, in the horse world, it is not any different. You just got to multiply everything by maybe 3 or 5. It really depends on which way you go, and it's kind of in some cases a little sad. In my experience with horses and how I actually got into horses was through a nonprofit organization. And really, they are, you know, your bread and butter when it comes to trying to, you know, learn how to be around horses. And that's because they don't really require you to upfront any money. A lot of times they just maybe want you to volunteer your time working with horses, maybe cleaning stalls and stuff like that. But a lot of times what happens is someone wants to get their child into horseback riding, they don't know where to go, and they go to the main barns. Okay, and so at the main barns, what ends up happening there is there's always the main barn itself, and then there's the instructor of that barn.
Okay.
And so that instructor has maybe this all ranges between each person, of course, in whatever state you're in. But you have an instructor who will give you maybe a lesson package. With kids, it's a lot easier because you can do things over summer camp, like horse summer camps, that are more economical on your wallet. It really depends. So let's say, I have a child, want to get him into sport, into the equestrian world. My first thing would to Google, horseback riding lessons. And a lot of times that'll pull up a barn. At the barn, you'll meet an instructor, and maybe that instructor, depending on how big the barn is, will have multiple instructors besides themselves. And you can do things like a lesson package, or you can do lessons per time you want to be there.
Okay.
And those, of course, depend on the availability of that instructor. But basically, it can be really expensive. You're talking anywhere for, if your instructor is doing like 30 minutes worth of work, and you're on a horse for 30 minutes, you're maybe looking at maybe like a $70 lesson. And, you want to do this 10 times in a month, there's $700. Not to mention, there's two different worlds, and in general, in the equestrian world, and horses in general, I should say, you've got Western riders and you do have English riders. Now, there's a really big stigma for both of them. Western, depending on who you go with, they do tend to be more laid back. English riders tend to be a little more rigorous and structured, in that there's a set way you look, there's a set way of things that you have, like your equipment. A lot of things in my experience have been, it's a lot of brand name things that you need. Whereas Western, again, depending on what you're going into, if you're jumping right into like a competitive sport such as like barrel racing or roping, it can be the same way. They have a set brand that they like to use, and they like to influence whoever else gets into it to kind of follow in their footsteps. But a lot of that brand name and a lot of that kind of equipment you don't necessarily need. You could always go for something more in your budget. Now, in either group, if you're going to do stuff on a budget, you become kind of I wouldn't say it an outcast so much as you are looked upon as just different. And a lot of times as a kid, you don't want to be seen as different. So you want to fit in with everyone else. So, you kind of pressure your parents into buying you whatever that brand and whatever type of clothing that they're using at the time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Would you say that, because I know, like, if you're going to, like, a public school, a lot of them will have their own teams. I don't know any school that I went to that ever offered anything equestrian related. So it would really have to be something that the kid and the parents were really into looking forward to versus, applying to the YMCA basketball league or something like that.
Right. And the big thing is, you do end up, depending on which way you go, kind of feeling, if you don't have the same stuff as everyone else, you feel kind of outcast. The organization that I grew up in, it's Blue Shadows, everything was the same. You wore the same shirt, you wear the same jeans, everyone wore the same boots. And so in that case, it really helped get rid of, I'm not wearing Ariat boots like that person over there. I'm just wearing a t-shirt today, but everyone else, that person over there is wearing a button up, an Ariat button up,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. You know, why I have a plain white helmet, but that girl over there has a helmet that is bedazzled and has ponies on it. Like, as a kid, you don't realize how much that impacts you until you become an adult and you're like, wow, that was kind of toxic.
Oh, wow.
And so there is a heavy influence on money in this
And that's,
sport, to
yeah.
say the least. And a lot of times, if you had money, your parents could support you. A lot of
Mhm.
times you would end up maybe seeing other people get these horses that are outrageously priced, in my opinion. But you'll see someone spend, let's just say, I'm going to throw out numbers. Someone will spend $30,000 on a horse and go to a show, and they have all the name brand stuff and all of the things that you don't have, and you realize, wow, they really have it going on,
Mhm.
and you don't. And it does create this kind of disparity between, the have and haves not. Because maybe you can't afford a horse, so you're stuck leasing a horse, which isn't bad. None of it is bad.
No.
As long as you can get out there and do what you need to, it's fine. But you do see that between when you're in the sport, sometimes you can see there is a difference in a difference in tax brackets.
Mhm.
And not to mention the amount of time. Lessons can be whenever you have time to do them. I know people that are taking lessons right now, and they work from home, and so they can be out there every day almost. And it seems like they're out there every day. But someone, on the other hand, like me, maybe I can only get out there twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. So this sport is heavily influenced by the economy and money, because if you are just, a basic, just want to get into it for the fun of it, you start to realize how expensive everything is. And you kind of start to realize, can I support my child through this? And sometimes it's a no. And when that happens, it's really sad. Like, going back to the organization that I was with, and why I love it so much, is that we didn't require you to have a horse. You could come from all walks of life. It didn't matter. You wore the same thing. You showed up at the same time. And if you had a horse, that was great. If you didn't, we would supply one for you. You could rent one. That's what made it so nice, because it really allowed people to have access into the horse world without having to upfront, thousands of dollars to get a horse. It's pretty amazing, because a lot of
Mhm.
people don't know how to get into it because they don't have a horse, and that's the thing. You don't need a horse because we supply one for you. I remember one kid, she was a great kid, and her mom was so nice. And it was, teaching her how to ride. She would pick up on everything. And one day her mom approached us, me and my one of the head trainers at the time, kind of approached us and was like, yeah, we're really struggling to meet the lesson fee.
Mhm.
At the time, because we were a nonprofit, we were kind of dependent on donations. The lesson fee covered the horse, really, but we would ask donation every year. And I think it was around the time that we had we call them dues, yearly dues. She came up to us and was like, I really can't afford it right now, and we're thinking of taking a break. And I remember just being so sad about that, because she was a great kid, she was a great writer, and we really wanted her to keep coming and be a part of the team. So we did a lot of, I guess, scrambling. We went up to our higher ups, because it's not just us that manages that one section. We went to our higher ups and we're like, hey, like, maybe we can start making a pool for people who can't afford it.
Mhm.
And it actually went into play. We actually did set up that fund for them, not just them, but for anyone who was struggling and came to us about it. She ended up staying, which was wonderful. You do see it that, people, it's an expensive sport. There's no doubt
Mhm.
about it. I don't know how else to put it. Like,
You just need the right community to stick with it.
right. And that's a big thing too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh
Hope that answers your question. I
It
know it's
does.
like really long-winded. You're going to
No,
be here
but
for
that's
like
good.
3-5 hours. Welcome to my TED Talk.
That's okay. I'm literally gonna post this on YouTube as Olivia's Tech Talk, so.
Oh my God, please don't.
Please do.
Next one, and you kind of touched on this a little bit with your previous answer, but in my course, we discussed how coaches and trainers have to treat both parents paying for the activity and children kind of as separate clients,
Oh
and how it
yeah.
can be difficult to manage both. For instance, example, volleyball team or baseball team, a helicopter parent being like, "Why aren't you putting my kid in doing that?" and having a lot of opinions and trying to balance that out. What would you say for parents looking to introduce their children into equestrian sports? What are some things that you would stress to the parent, or how would you look at managing both what the child's needs is and what the parent's wishes are?
I really am enjoying these questions. It's so true. The parents don't understand what we are doing. And the kids, I don't think understand what we're doing either, but they're having a good time. So it's not as, they don't really mind. But the parents, lose their absolute minds sometimes. You put their child up on this, 1,000-pound animal, and we're asking them, to go around in a circle, coaching the child to do something a little complex. And the parents are, kind of helicoptering over them like, is that okay? Is that allowed? The biggest thing that I would say to stress the importance of, the biggest thing I would say is for the parents, getting involved into horses and equestrian, it it's gonna be a long road.
Mhm.
It's not like soccer where you just kick a ball and, I know it's more complex than that. I'm not trying to offend anyone out there listening to this.
The soccer stands are gonna downvote you.
I know they're gonna come at me, but it's not just kicking a ball. It's not baseball where where you need to hit a ball, off a tee maybe, and eventually, when someone's throwing it at you, you're really at. I wouldn't call it a battle, but you're definitely trying to communicate with an animal that is looking for your child for guidance, as well as your child listening to me telling them what to do. So
Mm.
it's going to be a long road. So my recommendation is to put on a big sun hat, sit in the shade with a book or maybe a water, and sit there and just breathe in and breathe out, because your child I will ensure that your child is going to learn the best. Let your kid make mistakes,
Mhm.
because they're not going to learn if you don't. Let them make mistakes. Give them space. They're going to need a lot of space to learn, and it can be really scary. Horses can be pretty scary and stuff happens. Some good, some bad. Understand that your trainer knows what's best for your child and for the horse. Let them do what they need to do. Let them figure it out.
I think that's all very valid.
Yeah, and
And understanding, like you said, it's 1,000-pound animal for safety. If a parent doesn't know what's going on with the horse and they're stressing, everybody out and
yes, and that's a great point that you bring up there too, is that parents don't understand what big impacts they have on their child. I mean, sometimes they do, but not all the time. If you're standing on the ring side and you're stressed out and you're over there telling your kid as they go by, oh, is he supposed to be shaking his head? You're going to stress your kid out. And then your kid is going to release all that stress onto the horse. And they're going to become tense, and the horse is going to get tense, and it's not going to be good. Nothing crazy is going to happen, but the horse may stop paying attention to your kid. Like your kid's trying to get him to go in a circle. Maybe the horse just isn't interested anymore because, your kid is trying to manage you telling them not to do something and manage the instructor trying to tell them not to do something. So with a lot of parents, sometimes I do have to intervene, and I have to tell them, I understand that you're worried about them. I understand that you're excited for them to be, here in their lesson, but I need you to sit back and let me train them and let me coach them to do what I need them to do, not what you think they should do. Sometimes parents are really receptive and understand, and sometimes they don't. It all really depends. But
It's a
some
very well put answer.
yeah, sometimes you have to even take the parents and either take them aside and tell them that, or sometimes just giving them the lesson. Their kids out there having a great time and they're just so stressed about it. Sometimes you have to like go up to them and be like, "Listen, like what's going on? Why are you so stressed?" Yeah.
I like that answer a lot. It's a real eye opener. So now we're going to go into questions that are more about like how culture impacts your relationship with the sport. So this first one will be just has religion impacted your experience with your barn and riding in any way? And if so, how? Or have you or anyone ever expressed discomfort with any religious ceremonies or anything like that if it has played a role?
So, my personal experience with religion is before competitions mostly. And this was with my team. So, my team, I think there was over 18 of us on this team riding drill. Again, marching band on horses, synchronized swimming on horses. And before competition, not everyone was Christian or of some denomination, but the majority of the moms because we were kids at the time, a lot of the moms would come over and they would start a prayer circle.
Mm-hmm.
And being a Christian as well and coming from praying to have a good journey and things like that, it feels natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
It helps relieve a little bit of the nerves, I would say, and stress. And having a little prayer circle with our team was always something that it wasn't I guess it would be considered like a cultural thing. It was something that was expected because maybe the last year they had it and the last year before that, so it's been passed down every year before we go into what we call the tunnel, before we get into the arena. We would all get together and pray. So,
Almost like
I
a
mean,
rally.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, at the time, because again, I was 16, 17 at the time when this was happening. It didn't bother me personally, and it was fine for me. I never considered I never considered my good friend who was Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
We're here praying and, it's a long story. I'm not going to get into it. But, I never thought of, if that made her uncomfortable or not. I never
Mm-hmm.
thought to go up to her and ask her.
Okay.
But I personally haven't had anyone have discomfort. It's a little bit expected. We're not to stereotype anyone, but we're at a rodeo. There's a lot of people there that, they wear shirts that say God bless America, Jesus is my savior on their bumper stickers, and that's the kind of culture that you're riding into, so to speak.
So it's just expected. It's the norm.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. And so in that case, it was kind of like a given that even before the rodeo would start, we didn't ride specifically in the rodeo, but if you go to the rodeo, a lot of times they take a moment to, do the anthem, and if it's been a tough year, occasionally they will also say a prayer before like the bull riding and the events happen. So yeah, as far as impacted, it's definitely there, if you want it to be. And if you don't want it to be, you can definitely find groups of people that, keep it. Is agonistic the word?
Agnostic?
Agnostic, excuse me. But if you're going into more of the rodeo aspect, the more Western aspect of it, you will find that that's kind of the culture.
Okay.
On the other side of it, with like the English, more the English side, equestrian side of that, you don't find it as much. But then again, I personally haven't been looking for it, and I haven't really competed in the English equestrian side of it, so I can't really speak for that, but I can speak for the Western side, rodeo side of it all, that yes, it is there. It is there. They will most likely pray depending on your group. It's kind of the culture and the norm.
Okay. Next question. For those looking to enter a sport, they have to agree to take on more responsibilities, for any team. You're agreeing to show up on time, and usually that's done by the parents by making sure that their kid's there on time, taking care of the equipment, a certain respect for teammates or coaches where you're expected to listen to the coach. What are some unique duties that you've noticed apply to riding? And a lot of times people enter their kids into sports for character growth. Do you think any of these duties apply to personal character growth?
Oh yeah. So I'm trying to think of how I want to start this out. The biggest thing that I know will make you not only a better rider but a better person is taking care of the horse that you're going to be riding, or your own personal horse. That means pulling them out of the shed, out of the barn, out of the stall, pull them out, tying them up, brushing them, making sure they've got no cuts, scrapes, stings, whatever. Every kid should know, and every person should know how to do that and how to do it well, because it's your responsibility. That is your animal that you're taking care of. You need to respect your animal, that he's not just your animal, he's your companion, he's your partner. You must respect him. You got to be there for him. You have to advocate for him, and you have to tack him up. You got to put everything on correctly, because if you don't, in my opinion, you're not going to ride. If you don't know how to take care of your animal, your partner, if you can't take care of your partner and you can't get him ready, then, to me, that is probably going to be a failure on my part, because maybe I haven't taught them correctly. But if it's because, they're lazy and they don't want to do it, they just want to ride, that's not right. It's not right for someone else to get that horse ready so that they can just ride and not have to worry about it. Horseback riding it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of responsibilities with taking care of this, your partner that has a brain of its own, that you can't really have
Communicate with.
you can't have an English talking communication with. He's going to be there, and you got to take care of him. And you learn a lot just brushing your horse. You see, how's he feeling today? Is he feeling okay? Is he comfortable around you? Is he uptight? Does he look kind of sleepy? How is he doing? That's like the bare fundamentals and basics. And if you don't feel like tacking up your horse today, and you don't feel like taking care of your horse today, then you're not going to ride. Plain and simple. And going back to our question about parents, you really ride a fine line about spending these parents' money and teaching the child what is correct. Because you don't want to be there spending their parents' money for them not to, basically wasting it. If you tell the kid that they can't ride, because the parent's going to walk right up to you and be like, "You put my child on a horse." So you're really at a standstill there at some times because, the mom wants them to ride, but you can't let them ride because they're not going to they're not doing the duties that they need to do, which are take care of the horse.
They're not taking care of their responsibilities.
Exactly. I think sometimes people forget how important it is that you take on those responsibilities, and that I think people forget how important it is sometimes because they just want to get up and go.
Being on the horse.
Exactly. And it's so much more than that. You have to clean up after him. You got to wipe his nose because it's full of boogers. You got to wipe his eyeballs because he's got boogers there too. You got to pick his hooves out, make sure there's no rocks in him. All those little things that add up. He's got a scratch on his chest. What did that come from? And you'll find that, when you give kids the space to brush their horse, a lot of times they don't like to clean up after their horse. But if you give them the space to do the fun things like brush their mane, maybe braid their mane, you find that they really get this really personal connection with their horse. And you find that, they start to learn that there's more than just themselves to take care of, that there's a big whole world out there that they can explore just through the horse. They learn how to take care of the horse so they can really take care of anything, dog, cat, how they talk to other people too. When you have these lessons with other kids, they interact with the other kids at the barn and they go, "Oh, my horse can run faster than yours." They kind of talk together, and it's fun to watch little kids grow up together in horses because you find you find out that even though they may not all come from the same like background, they all have the one thing in common, which is their love for horses and the know-how to take care of their horses and stuff like that.
I love that. That is so cute, just thinking of like all these kids growing up together. A community to grow with.
Exactly, and I mean all the people that I grew up with, no matter what, even if it's been a couple years since I've talked to one of them, but I'm like, "Hey, you want to come out and brush the horses with me?" It's bath day coming up, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'd love to." And they come out, and my friends come out, and they come out maybe once every like 3 months, and they're like, "I really needed this. I was having a hard time at work or, in their life, but, coming here and being able to accomplish like cleaning the stalls, cleaning out where they live with the poop, cleaning out the stalls and, brushing to make them look pretty, and, now they're all clean, like that gave me back control over my life essentially. It's it's amazing to me.
Sounds very cathartic. Um, Moving on to the next question. Has your gender or the gender of others impacted the sport and how you interact with it? And do certain genders gravitate towards certain roles within your field, or is it pretty equal? What I mean, looking at the other sports that we've studied, people talk about, soccer moms, even if it's a little girls' league. Generally, the men are the coaches, and then the women's are just the soccer moms providing food, that sort of thing. And then we talk about how that gender role can affect little girls or little boys growing up in sports about what their roles should be. Is there anything like that in the equestrian world?
Oh yeah. It's kind of interesting really. So in drill team specifically, it's really heavily, I guess, feminine presenting. A lot of women, a lot of moms are there with their kid, and it's a lot of girls, "Mom, I want a pony" type deal. And so we do get a lot of girls. But occasionally you'll get, the boy in there. And the sad thing is they feel outcast because, I mean, I'm the only boy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, like in my experience, when I was one of the main instructors in for Blue Shadows, it was pretty like it was just kind of sad because you don't want them to quit, but they kind of feel so uncomfortable that they just, they're the only boy there and they don't like it. And so they do end up kind of dropping out. We did have, not to say that we didn't have any boys, but like,
That's interesting because I thought they'd take on the more like I want to be a cowboy type role and kind of step into that, I guess,
right.
gender or
And
cultural stereotype.
And the thing is, with what we were doing, like, so Blue Shadows, the organization for Drill Team, in that sense, it was very, and still is very heavily female orientated. There are not a lot of men doing Drill Team, which is pretty sad because, I mean, men are just as good as riders in any aspect. And that's the other thing too. It really depends on where you're looking at. Now, if we're looking at roping, for instance, that is very heavily male orientated and dominated. And so I'm struggling to find the right words, but it depends on what type of
writing or where.
Right. And so, like, roping, I would say, is more
Male
orientated, but if you look at, like, Drill Team, for instance, is very female orientated. But there is definitely a mix when you're looking at, we'll just do more backyard stuff. So people who are just poking around doing trail riding, that's a great mix of people. You've got, it's pretty much 50-50. A lot of just people out there having a good time, not really caring.
Welcoming, like you haven't noticed any like outright or even like hidden sexism, misogyny. It just seems more like of a circumstance as to what people are gravitating towards.
Well, see, but that's the thing. It seems very open and welcoming until you get into it. So I would say if I would hesitate learning how to rope because it is so male dominated. And especially if I wanted to go pro, like I want to go to, the Las Vegas, it's very male dominated, and it's a little intimidating, but you just have to kind of dig your heels in and anything, realize that you can take up just as much space as anyone else. You have every right to be there just as anyone else does. And a lot of it, I mean, with any sport, you're gonna have those challenges. You're gonna have people who are trying to put you down. You just really got to stick to it. Yeah, it's very 50-50, I would say, and it really depends on what you're looking to do. I will say that a lot of, and this is maybe too much of a generalization, but there's all, like, some of the main equestrian centers, I'll call them, out here are male dominated. Excuse me, male headed. The main owner is, but underneath him, in his equestrian center, a lot of the barns are headed by females. So it really depends on where you're looking. Actually, something that, sorry, I keep rambling here. Something that I thought was interesting was, so I'd love to continue to learn, and so I'm kind of learning how to do dressage. So that's English riding. And I'm learning how to do dressage, and actually my instructor the other day was a man. And I thought, oh, how interesting, because I've never had, well, and that's not entirely true. I have had a male instructor before, but that was when that was when I was like 10. But now as an adult with a male instructor, at first, like, my first thought was, oh, it's a guy, how cool. But then I was kind of like, a little bit of bias in me, a little bit going like, well, is he qualified to be teaching me? Whereas I had, the lady instructor, and I didn't think that.
Interesting.
So, but then I was like, what am I saying? Of course, if they hire, because the barn I'm riding at, I've ridden at. I like what they do there. I love the head owner of this barn. She's so fun, and very informative. But I trust her judgment, basically. So of course she's gonna hire someone who knows what they're doing. You definitely can still feel that kind of, I guess, is the word sexism.
Or
You
just
can
like gender bias, I would
there
say.
you go. Gender. You can still feel that kind of gender bias, but immediately I was like, of course he's qualified. Like, why did I even think that?
Yeah.
And he was actually really great. So
It's just more of like sounds to me like it just people like moving past like any outright sexism versus unlearning maybe
yes,
habits of the past, which was
yeah.
good. Kind of following that, how do you think any race or ethnicity plays into how riding looks today? I'm not really familiar with like equestrian sport history, so I don't know if there was or if there still is a race or ethnicity discrepancy that maybe you've noticed in your time managing your barn and your lessons or how you grew up. Was that something that
It really depends on where you're located, and it's not a great topic, but we're
Mhm.
here to talk about it. Um,
Well, I can provide an example like from my course. What they often bring up is lower income families not having access to certain
yes.
sports. So you have certain ethnicities and certain races, if they're more likely to be in a certain tax bracket, they're less likely to be able to join certain sports, or the sports they do join tend to be very, like you're saying, community oriented. Like I know in a lot of urban areas, in a lot of cities, generally the most publicly funded sports are like basketball. So you're going to get a lot of basketball players
Mhm.
versus in other areas, like they call them country club sports, if you're more affluent and you come from like a more wealthier white family, you're more likely to play, rugby or golf or those types of
Yes.
things.
Yeah, and diving right in with those examples, yes, it is not any different.
Mhm.
Again, depends on what type of riding you're gonna get into. Okay, so
Mhm.
again, love my organization. We didn't care as long as you could pay the fee to borrow a horse and once a year pay the yearly fee, you were golden. I
Mhm.
mean, we ended up later having kind of like donated hand-me-downs for the uniform parts, again, because everyone wore the same thing. But it definitely, where you're located plays a huge part. So, talking about English riding, for instance, if you want to do English riding at the Fancy Barns in the Equestrian Center, you are gonna have to cough up a lot of dough,
Mhm.
and it's expensive, and the people there can be a little ruthless as far as how you're dressed and how you look. However, there are barns that literally don't care. They love horses, they love teaching people, and those are the type of barns that you need to try to find when you're trying to get into the sport.
Mhm.
And the type of people that you want to be involved with. Like for me, I don't care where you come from. I don't care, what you do in your own spare time. When you're here at the barn, you're here to take care of your partner. You're here to make sure that they've got everything they need, and you're here to give me your full attention. That's all, and we're only doing this for an hour. That's all I ask for you for the hour. A lot of times you will find that at these big, high, fancy barns, you don't see a big mix of people.
Mhm.
It tends to all swing one way. It's very unfortunate, and there does need to be changes made within this community. And there has been a few people on like TikTok, on social media, starting to
Mm.
talk about this a lot more, and starting to say, like, discuss their difficulties with being, I think, I forget what her name is, but she was like the first black woman or black teen to make it into her pony club or whatever.
And
Yeah,
that's
like
recent.
Yeah, like not necessarily like that, but she's like one of the first people to make it up into not like pro, but to make it just to be involved in the sport and just making herself known. Like the Olympics, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really a whole lot of mixture there.
It's the people who already come from families who can already afford to spend the time in training.
Right. And then going back into the gender, it's very mixed.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see that a lot of people tend to praise the men, which is maybe just the couple articles that I was reading. They seemed to be praising the men and how great they were, and then the women they were like kind of more critical towards. So, I mean, I don't know what's up with that, and I don't think we have enough time here to talk about all of that, but it's definitely something interesting going on there. I think we are slowly moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, small time organizations are really allowing access for a lot of families. And I love
Mm-hmm.
that because, like I said, I don't care what you look like. You're here to do your business for an hour and then that's it.
The problem just seems to be more with access more than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. And that's the thing. It's like access plays a huge part of it. But if you can find someone who will give you access, run with it. Don't look back. If you can
Okay.
afford it and you can do it, just go with it, and try to keep, if it's your kid or if it's you, look past it, realize you can take up space and you can be just as good as anyone else. You can be just as good as, the Olympic riders. Like, you can make it. It's fine.
You're so supportive. I love it. I know these questions can be a little bit more sensitive topics.
It's all
Last
good.
one. Politics tends to be involved in large media trends for sports. Like, I'm sure everyone knows, like, the Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the anthem to bring up, cultural issues within the United
Mhm.
States. Have you noticed any political issues coming up in your sport? And for anybody voicing their opinions in the equestrian field, has that ever led to, like, lashback or canceling people? Has the politics of the United States impacted your relationship with the sport or how you view other people and their relationship with the sport? And maybe not at all, or maybe they have?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, speaking for myself, when I'm at the barn, it's time to ride. It's
Mhm.
time to focus on our goals. It's time to have a good time. I'm not thinking about politics, and I sure as heck am not allowing anyone else around me to speak about politics because I'm on my horse. I'm in my happy place. I'm having a good time. You
Yes.
know. Um it really depend again, I don't like using this so much, but it really depends on what you're excuse me, it really depends on who you're talking to. Again, if we're at the rodeo, like my family just went to the Reno rodeo. Sometimes there might be people in the audience being political.
Mhm.
But in general, the sport itself isn't they don't make it political. Yeah, there's not really a whole lot of political influence in there. But if you want to talk about what abuse is in the horse community, horse abuse, animal abuse, if you want to talk about that, or if you want to talk
Ooh.
about like if they support PETA or not, or if you're vegan or not, there's a lot of really interesting beliefs that people have. Again, I'm on my horse. I don't care, but you do get a lot of that as well.
So, following up on that last question, we did grow up in the time witnessing, like, the rise of social media and influencers, which is how a lot of athletes end up, representing or voicing their opinions, and that's where the lashback comes in, where it wasn't really there, 20, 30 years ago. It was other
Mhm.
people reporting on the athletes versus them having their own voice. Now they have, like, social media managers for athletes or organizations trying to get their own voices out. How uniquely has this impacted horse riding? And you touched on this a little bit with the TikToks you were mentioning?
Like I said, like learning about the TikTok person that I had mentioned earlier, she's black, learning about her struggles in the community and kind of understanding where she comes from, because the horse community can be pretty brutal as far as, she can't ride because she doesn't use, name brand horse boots, or she doesn't know what she's doing because, rides differently than I do. You see that a lot. People kind of make fun of it in social media, and it's starting to bring talks about, why are we so toxic?
Mhm.
And why are, people will post in the comments like, this person doesn't know how to ride, and people will comment on there and be like, literally they were asking for like constructive criticism, not, you to be rude to them.
Mhm.
And it's kind of good and bad, because we're starting to see a lot of like the same personal struggles. These people who are Grand Prix riders, the highest of the high. Sometimes they'll make, TikToks, or they'll post on social media, and you realize, yeah, hey, they are people. These people that we look up to, they like to dance and sip margaritas just like I do, that's crazy, or, oh, hey, they like to put horse boots on first and then put the saddle. I don't know. Weird stuff like
Little things
that.
like that.
Yeah, but you kind of start to see like, oh, I'm not alone. It's slowly starting to be, sorry, how do I say this? It's slowly starting to be normalized that you see everything on social media now, but it has its benefits and negatives, such as like you start to see people riding a certain way. I remember there was a talk on how show jumpers ride. I think it was an Olympic level rider, and she was going over this huge jump. I mean, it had to be over 10 feet, I think. It was something really ridiculously high. She jumped over it, and her posture, her equitation was horrendous. If any of us would have seen that, anywhere else, we'd be like, she doesn't know what she's doing. It kind of sparked a discussion. She ended up coming back later and said, this was a really big jump. Unfortunately, this is how I had to jump it. I do not recommend anyone else to do this, but this is what I had to do this. Which, like, didn't really change, wasn't really a good, like, discussion. I mean, yeah, it made sense why she did it the way she did, but it kind of sparked a debate online saying, what happened to the equitation? What happened to the posture and equitation of these athletes? Why is show jumping, for instance, why did we throw our posture out the window? So equitation is how you look on the horse. Do you sit upright? Are you slumped over? Are you sitting up tall? Are your legs underneath you? Are they behind you? Are they really in front of you? Stuff like that. That's a little preface for you, or for
Okay.
anyone listening. But, the equitation of it all has just completely been thrown out the window, because they're trying to jump as many fences as they can in as little time as possible. And it's starting to spark a online social debate. We need to do better.
Mhm. Things that maybe couldn't have been shared without social media.
Right. And also, social media gives you access to people who think like you do. Maybe at your barn, you think that putting horse boots, supportive boots on the leg is bad. Maybe you don't like that. That's actually something that I am kind of going through right now. Um, and one of the trainers had mentioned that I should maybe support my horse's leg a little bit more,
Mhm.
by using what are called polo wraps. So you wrap the leg up, to give it some support. Well, I actually, over social media, came into contact with a article that gave some pretty strong evidence saying that polo wraps and supportive boots may be more detrimental to your horse than positive, in that it'll basically cook the tendons. The leg will become too hot and cook the tendon, leading and ligaments, leading to more, maybe possibly leading to injury. And so when he had mentioned that, I was kind of like, well, and that was just me personally. I didn't know how to answer him right away, and I was like, okay, I'll consider it. But in the back of my head, I was like, I'm not going to consider it because I know that my horse doesn't need them. Not only like I know he doesn't need them, but also I have some scientific evidence, or at least a couple studies that people have said, maybe it's not good. So, in that sense, that's something else about social media that, I may not have come across that anytime soon. And there's a lot of myths around horses and horseback riding in general that people are now starting to pick apart, and they're using social media to say, hey, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is good anymore. And then a lot of people may jump on the bandwagon and say, yeah, I think you're right as well. But going back to my original point, sometimes you may be at a place, at a barn, or in an environment where you don't want to be the outcast. So if you go to social media, you might find people who think like-minded as you do. And whether it's right or wrong, I mean, that's a whole other bag of beans, but at least you can find people who are of like mind through social media.
Okay. Bumping along to the next question. Globalization is defined as the process in which organizations develop operations on an international scale. How, if at all, have you seen this play out, and do you view this as a positive or a negative? And just because I know this question can be a little bit confusing, I'll provide an example through golf, because that's a sport that I know.
Okay.
Right now, we have like the PGA, which is like an American league. A lot of really popular players are quitting the PGA and they're signing on with a Saudi Arabian league for more money. And there's been a lot of outcry on that because while they're getting paid more money, a lot of people are injecting like political views into it, and then other people are saying it's good. There's just a lot of debates. Has anything similar like that you've noticed come up in equestrian?
I personally haven't been at any end of that. I mean, there's plenty of like horse organizations within the United States. For instance, like there's the EXCA, which is the Extreme Cowboy Association. Yeah, missing a couple words there, but basically, they build obstacles, and your horse has to go through them with precision and class, and you have to make it look real pretty and do it as fast as possible.
Okay.
I have a good friend of mine who does that, and he's also a judge, and he also competes, and he's a trainer, and he does a whole bunch of stuff. I know they started here in the United States, but they have now since moved to Australia.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I don't know if this is really going to answer your question, but like the sport moving to Australia is good for the horse community because you get to have more people spread out and doing the same thing that you're doing, just in a different country. And maybe if you're good enough, you'll be asked to go across country. I think with I think with the horse sport, it's already so international that I don't think it could get any more international. I mean, I have again the barn that I'm currently training at. She has trained in Sweden. She's gone from Sweden. She's gone to Germany. I mean, I think she also went to France for a show. So definitely lots of places to progress to So, I mean, I think most of it is pretty positive. I don't think in your example, there's anyone leaving the United States to go to, England. But I think that, I guess what I could say is some people believe that if you want to be a great dressage rider, that you should go to Europe and learn from the pros in Europe. Then you've made it. Personally, that's not what I want to do because I don't have that kind of money. But that's what some people believe, and I think it really depends on the person. But in in general, yeah, there's not a whole lot going on as far as I can tell there.
Okay.
But some people do believe that if you are from, if you're foreign, like you're from England or like Sweden or Spain or France, and you've trained in those areas, that you're the creme de la creme, when in reality, that may not be the case. I mean, and I'm probably, if you do post this online, I'm probably going to get like, what is that? A lot of
Canceled?
hate mail. Yeah. I'm going to get a lot of hate mail and canceled because, a lot of people think that. But there's plenty
Mhm.
of good writers and people here in the United States that are just as good as those in Europe or anywhere else.
Also, as
That's
a side note, no one should send you anything like that because I won't let them.
aw. Um, well, there's a lot of other places that consider, like, a lot of foreign players will come and play for American teams because it's
Mhm.
considered like basketball, and especially is pretty international. They'll say, okay, well, we'll play for an American team because American teams have good basketball sports. So maybe it's just perspective.
Yeah. No,
Um,
and I think that's a good point that you bring up, because it's the same aspect. They come here to be a part of the good basketball team, and it's the same thing of if I wanted to go to Europe and learn from a trainer there. Like, it's the
mhm.
same aspect of, oh, I'm learning
They
from the
they have it
best.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Everyone has greener pastures when you look over the fence.
it's a very like mature outlook to have.
Well,
Um,
I mean, your pasture is just as green, but you look over the fence and you're like, "Oh, that's greener." But,
yeah, that's
sometimes you
definitely
just,
the better one.
yeah.
And I guess, with international, obviously horses were already in Europe for such a longer time before they came to the Americas. So, uh, you know what I mean? The last
Yeah.
international
No, I get what
place.
you're saying. You have to also take into consideration what sport you're in. If you're looking at, the rodeo and stuff like that, a lot of that not originated, but a lot of that has more American vibes to it. But if
Mhm,
you're looking at, show jumping, dressage, all of that is kind of like Europe, you
mhm.
know. So it really, where it originated, I think, has a big impact.
Awesome. Well, thank you for getting that question out. I thought that one would be like a little rough. Um,
Yeah, no problem.
what are some, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, what are some ethical issues that have been brought up in your time as like a horse trainer, either by yourself or others, and how have you managed or approached any of these ethical issues?
Do you have an example?
Well, you had mentioned before about PETA and are people abusing the horses and, other people who maybe only have experience with small dogs or like very gentle animals versus seeing how you have to treat 1,000-pound animal and they say, oh, well, aren't you kind of being abusive? And like, how do you manage that kind of feedback?
Oh, I see. A lot of these issues have to deal with people who are uneducated, and not in the wrong way. They just are either not informed, or, you know, I don't know, when's the last time you've been around a horse? Like,
Mhm,
maybe a couple years? And
mhm,
then maybe even then you didn't, interact with it that much. You just maybe sat on it, or you pet it, or you gave it a carrot or something like that. A lot of times, a lot of these issues come up with people who don't know anything about horses. And it's nice when they're willing to learn, but a lot of time you're just kind of wasting your breath because they don't want to learn. So some people, I'm trying to think of a good example that isn't too controversial, but all of it is kind of controversial. For instance, sorry, I'm still trying to think of a good example.
Okay. Or I guess any ethical issues, like I know you mentioned like PETA has some opinions.
PETA has so many opinions, and I'm sorry, PETA does nothing for animals, and they
Mm-hmm.
they come from the goodness of their hearts, but in reality, they just really are not informed properly. So, pony rides, for instance. A lot of people, not a lot of, in Burbank, there's pony rides. And because we touched on PETA, I'll just run with PETA for right now. PETA Outlook group that has shown up, and they have said how the ponies are being abused. They're being abused, they're being overworked, they're skinny, they're not fed properly. There's a long laundry list that they have. Well, the ponies are not overworked. The ponies there have maybe like a 4-hour shift, and then they sit in the shade with water and food, and then, they rotate their horses out. And yes, they do that, I think they're operating maybe 5 times a week. The horses get ample time to take time off and to be rotated out, and they're well cared for in that they're fed more than enough to keep them healthy. The vet comes out yearly to do their teeth. They get their hooves trimmed every, I think, what is it? I don't even remember how many, it's like 4 weeks. They're just really well taken care of. And see, from an outsider's perspective, you don't realize how much goes into taking care of these animals and how expensive it is. And for someone to run a horse business like that, they're not going to let their animals, get skinny and get sick. However, I get it. There are some people who are not as good at taking care of their animals, but
Mm-hmm.
that's with anyone, and that's anywhere. And a lot of it, again, is just misinformation, and they don't want to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
did you know that horses need their feet trimmed every 4 weeks? Probably
Mm-mm.
not. Did you know that they need to have their teeth done every year?
Mm-mm.
Exactly. And so those are the kind of things that come up. A lot of it just is from outsider perspective. So one of the big things, it's not really ethical, and to me it's more funny. I used to have a pasture, and I had my 3 horses in there at the time. I had 3 of them all in this pasture. And during the day, the sun was out, but they had shade. They had a shader. Okay? My
Mm-hmm.
horses were not without a shader.
Mm-hmm.
My horses would not stand under the shader when it rained or when it was 110 outside.
They just
There
didn't
was
wanna.
Nope. And right now, I have him in a stall. I've got a gray horse, that, really shouldn't be standing out in the sun. And you know what he does all day? When I leave in the morning and when I come home at night to feed him, he's
It's in the
standing in the
sun.
sun. I came down there one day when it was raining. They got to eat. It was pouring
Mm-hmm.
rain. What were they doing? Standing in the rain. Only one of them was under the cover. The rest of them were standing in the rain like, eh.
They're
And
so
so
silly.
they're sometimes you really wonder if they've got a brain. And so from someone across the way, because there's a bunch of houses across from my house, someone who doesn't know anything about horses sees, a horse is standing out in the sun all year. Uh, Listen, I can't control them. They're going to stand in the sun. I could have fully covered arena with no sun, and they're still going to find a way to stand in the rain or the sun. And again, a lot of that just has to do with, train with a little quick Google search. Maybe just sending them a quick letter saying, "Hey, I know you see my horses out there in the sun. I promise you they have lots of water, and I'm not abusing them. They just don't have the brain power to stand anywhere else. And quite frankly, they like it. They love that vitamin D.
They like to be warm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not really ethical, but a lot of times, just things that come up is just a lack of knowledge. And I really hope that whenever things like that come up, that I can go up to them and teach them, like, listen, this is how you do this. Some people, I remember what I wanted to say originally. Sorry, it's taken me so long to get to the point about like horse abuse. And it's really a sticky subject because a lot of right now with social media, like we were talking about earlier, a lot of social media right now is teaching your horse how clicker training like a dog, and
Hmm.
teaching your horse what's called liberty. So they're out in an arena and they have full range to do whatever they want, but you can point and they will do what you want them to. So, like going around in a circle, stopping, backing up, and moving around with you, being basically like one on one with each other. And it's really cool. Like, I applaud the people who can teach their horses that. But some people have taken it, like clicker training, for instance. Some people, not liberty, but more the clicker training. Some people have taken it where they think that's the only way you can teach your horse. I'm not saying that, cowboys were always right, because there were a lot of stuff that the cowboys did that, was abusive. But there are certain things that make me feel, and this is more a personal opinion, that isn't enough. So, like clicker training, for instance, you click the button to get your horse, you say stop, and you click the button, your horse is supposed to stop. Okay.
Hmm.
I don't know how to tell anyone this, but if you've got a horse, again, maybe 1,000 pound or more plus animal running towards you, and you're telling it to stop, I can guarantee you that horse is not going to stop, no matter how much clicker training you do. It becomes a fight or flight instinct. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people have forgotten that, that's what these animals are. And in that case, like, I'm not saying you need to beat your horse, but there are better ways to teach ground manners, because that's kind of what they're going for. So ground manners are just how you walk on the ground, hand leading, like a dog. You don't want the dog to be pulling. You don't want the horse to be pulling you. You don't want the horse to be in your space, stuff like that. There are good ways to teach your horse how to be doing that. And some people think clicker training is the end all be all. And I can tell you right now, out of, the, how many horses do I have now? 4 horses that I have right now, that none of them are going to listen to a clicker. And just because I haven't trained them to do it. But they do know what a rope wiggling means. Like, you wiggle the rope under, like, when you have a dog, like jump rope,
Hmm.
kind
Hmm.
of like that, only you're wiggling it. I can tell you my horses know what that means. So in that case, it's just a difference of opinion, but a lot of people think there's one way to train a horse, and there's lots of different ways to do it. So it does become a very sticky situation. I hope that
I
answers that.
think
I know that was like
I
really
think you did.
long-winded. Patch something together there.
This one is kind of more just general, open-ended. There's only 2 questions left. What is your idea of best practices in horseback riding? I think you already touched with, having respect for the animal, having the knowledge, and having the right community. Is there anything else you wanted to add for best practices?
No, just reiterating that you got to respect your horse. But you
Mhm.
also have to understand, and again, this might piss some people off. You have to understand that you're in charge and you are the leader of this animal. It's not the other way
Mhm.
around. You need to be in charge and teach your horse to kind of respect what you say and listen to what you say, and don't be wishy-washy, and don't let him walk over you. I've seen way too many people in this community let their horses walk right all over him, and there's no respect there. A lot of times it's on the ground. the horse just walks right through them and pushes them, and it becomes not only a hazard to them, but a hazard to anyone else in their vicinity. And so it's a lot about respect. It's a lot of understanding and communication with an animal that does not speak English. But the big takeaway is to get on your horse and have a good ride. And remember that no matter what, you're there to get to where you want to be, which is maybe you want to do a show at the end of the year. Maybe you just want to get your confidence back. Whatever it is that you want to do, focus on it and don't let anyone distract you. Have fun, find a trainer that you like, find a community that you like to be around. Try not to let anyone else influence what you want to do. And, if people are talking shit, get on your horse and just keep going. Just ignore it and just keep riding or move.
Keep
Either
riding
one,
into that sunset.
basically.
Last question, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. As a manager where you interact with both animals and people on a day-to-day basis, have you developed any of your own personal theories or ideas about your sport? Like, have you noticed some practices with yourself or other coaches that were more successful with others in getting across your idea, where you see maybe one trainer doing something one way and you're realizing in your experience, no, this is better, or something that maybe you weren't necessarily taught, but from your experience that you built?
Yeah, so I'm both a visual learner and I think it's a audio learner.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what the right word is there. When teaching kids especially, you have to show them both ways. And the thing is you have to let them be hands-on. The way I teach is how I think. That helps me, or I guess teaching people how I think helps me realize, oh, I don't think they understand what I'm trying to convey. And so trying to come up with little cute things for kids to remember does help them. And a
Right.
lot of trainers, everyone has their own sayings and ways they explain things. I think in general, a lot of us make cute little sayings, and that's kind of like the norm across. And then they may not be the same, but they are kind of the norm across all the different trainers. Like for instance, one that I've learned for dressage or English riding is that
Mm-hmm.
your arm is like a rubber band, and you're moving with the horse, and you're not stiff. You have fluidity in your elbows. That rubber band metaphor is great because, I have to tell myself, move like a rubber band. One of the biggest things that I teach kids and anyone, not just kids, but like my friends, my family, if you're learning Western, I teach them how to ride with one hand, and that's ice cream cone up. So you hold your reins and the excess of your rein sticks out of your hand like an ice cream cone. And so if you visualize holding an ice cream cone, bam, that's how you ride a horse. That helps a lot of people because then when I tell them, "Hey, you're dropping your ice cream cone," they go, "Oh," and they fix it. They rotate their wrist. Stuff like that. I think as far as theories goes, the more they're not really theories, but the more time you spend with your horse and the more time you take to make a connection with them, and understand, where they're coming from, it helps you become a better rider. My horse right now, we're having a lot of hard troubles because he's really spooky about everything. So we're really trying to overcome that together. And, I just have to understand where he's coming from. Like I was sick for a week. I can't be mad at him because he didn't get out a whole lot. It's like
Mm-hmm.
if I stayed inside my house for a month and then I went outside, especially like how COVID happened, we stayed in our houses for a while and then we went outside and we're like, what do I do again? You know, I think in general, everyone has their own way of teaching, but the fundamentals are all the same. And one thing may be explained to you one way, but overall, someone else may come at you with a different saying, but overall, the fundamentals are the same.
Well, if you don't have anything else that you want to add, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Yeah, of
I
course.
learned a lot more about equestrian sports than I could even imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I still have to teach you how to ride, so there's that.
That's true.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that even though it is an expensive sport, there are definitely ways to ball on a budget. The way I grew up riding, the way we had horses all these years, we cut a lot of corners. And it didn't and it didn't impact the horse at all because the horse was living, having the time of his life. There's definitely ways to cut corners and to cut costs, and it's not as hard as you think.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Angel, you still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Good job. That's it.
Hey all, thank you again so much for listening to our channel. It means the world to us. If you wanted to support us further, you can follow us on Twitter at neon_outpost, on Instagram at neon.outpost, or on SoundCloud as Neon Outpost. And our website is finally up, all links are below, or you can send any questions, topics, or feedback to neonoutpostpodcast@gmail.com. And your fun fact for the day:
that Olivia did successfully teach me how to ride. I love her horse, so thank you, Olivia. I also not only passed this project, but I also completed my certificate program in sport management. Fun stuff. Ciao.